Hello everyone, this is Frank DeMore from the End Times Research Ministry, and today is March the 30th of 2015. We're getting very close to some very important wars that were prophesied in the Old Testament. And the one that I want to concentrate on today, in light of what has happened over the weekend, is the Psalm 83 war. And I know there are still many people who don't know anything about the Psalm 83 war. So the first thing I need to do is go into the Word of the Lord to show you what God stated about this psalm, which is the Psalm 83, and it is about a future war. The Lord said this: "Do not keep silent, O God, and do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God, for behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, 'Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more.'" So right there you know exactly who the Lord is talking about, what nation the Lord is dealing with here, and that would be the nation of Israel. So you have people coming together, crafty counsel against the nation of Israel. In verse 5, "For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a," now this is really important in light of what happened this weekend, "they have formed a confederacy against you." Coming together, a bunch of nations coming together, forming this confederacy that will eventually bring this confederacy against the nation of Israel. Now, this is who's going to be coming, according to what the Lord says in Psalm 83. In verse 6, "The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Hagarites, Jabal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, and the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot." So, if anyone who read this didn't know anything about the Bible and they didn't study the Old Testament, they would know who these nations are that start in verse 6. And so let me break down each one of the nations for you so that you'll know exactly who the Lord is talking about in this psalm that shows us that they're going to be going after the nation of Israel in the latter days. All right, so now that you saw what part of this Psalm 83 says, let's take a look at each one of the nations to clarify exactly who they are for you. You'll see in this photo, I listed 1 to 10, and on the left-hand side are the Old Testament names, and I'm going to show you who the modern-day countries are as we know them today. So number 1, the tents of Edom are today's the Palestinians and South Jordanians. Number 2, the Ishmaelites, the Saudi or Saudi Arabia, the Ishmael, the father of the Arabs. Number 3, Moab, are the present-day Palestinians and Central Jordanians. Number 4 are really today's the Hagarenes or modern-day Egyptians. This is going to be important with the news that just came out as well today. Number 5, Jabal are today's the Hezbollah and North Lebanese. Number 6, Amman are the Palestinians and the North Jordanians. Number 7, Amalek are the Arabs in the Sinai area, and of course the Sinai area would be part of the Egyptian area. Number 8, Philistia are the people of modern-day Hamas of the Gaza Strip. Number 9, Tyre is today's the Hezbollah in South Lebanese. And number 10, Assyria are today's Syrians and North Iraqis. Now these are the people in the areas that were combined in the Old Testament. But as you know now from the right-hand side, exactly who they are. So let's now go into the news, and I can connect the dots for you, showing you that the road is being laid out for us for this coming Psalm 83 war. Now the first article that I want to bring to your attention came out just a few days ago on March the 27th, 2015. The headline, "Hezbollah would join Saudi coalition if it fought Israel, Nasrallah. For those of you who may not know, Nasrallah is the head of the Hezbollah who hates Israel. And as you can see from the arrows, he is the head of the Hezbollah in Tyre, which is southern Lebanon, and also Hezbollah in northern Lebanon. So this man is very influential when it comes to the Psalm 83 war and joining alliances with Saudi Arabia. Beirut. If the Saudi-led coalition bombing Yemen directed its airplanes toward Israel, Hezbollah would join it, party chief Syed Hassan Nasrallah declared Friday night, accusing Riyadh of seeking to regain control of Yemen. Now, what we're seeing in this article is actually a prelude to what the Lord had already told us in the Psalm 83. Because we see Saudi Arabia that is hooked up with, guess what? With the Hezbollah in that Psalm 83 war. So now that when we see one of the leaders of the factions who want to destroy Israel and who've already come out many different times saying that they want to wipe Israel off the map, we see the very foundations of what the Lord had warned us. Nasrallah coming together, joining the Saudi Arabia to attack Israel, if need be. It goes on to say, Nasrallah, speaking in the day after the Saudi Arabia launched a surprise military operation against the rebel Houthis in Yemen, also rejected claims that Iran posed a threat to the Gulf. The real reason the Saudi-led coalition is attacking Yemen is that Saudi Arabia has failed. It has lost control over Yemen and fears the Yemen now belongs to the people. The goal of the coalition is Saudi Arabia to regain control over Yemen, he added. Hezbollah calls for the aggression to stop and the resumption of talks aimed at a political solution to the conflict, Nasrallah continued. We call on the people of the governments joining the coalition to consider that the blood of their armies are spilling in Yemen for the sole purpose of helping Saudi royalty reclaim control over Yemen. It is the right of the Yemeni people to counter the aggression, he said, expressing confidence that the people will be victorious in their confrontation with Saudi Arabia. Now, in my video that I gave on Friday, I mentioned that Saudi Arabia is definitely in the Psalm 83 war, whereas Yemen is not mentioned in the Psalm 83 war. However, they are mentioned in the Ezekiel 38 war, which comes after the Psalm 83 war. So many who are looking now at the events that are being played out in the Middle East between the Saudis and Yemen feel that the Saudis will continue to take control, because if the Saudis did not take control, then in the Ezekiel war that Saudis, the Saudi Arabians, would have been also mentioned with Yemen going after Israel, but we don't see that. But what we see is Saudi Arabia going after the Israelis with Nasrallah. So there's a lot of different variables here, but it's the same exact people that the Lord warns us about for these two particular wars that haven't been fought yet. So it makes sense when you look at the headline, Nasrallah would join Saudi Arabia, obviously that coalition there to fight Israel, but they don't want to get involved in fighting Yemen. Here's the real importance. Let me show you what happened with this coalition that was just formed. So we always have to keep in the back of our mind what the Lord said about this confederacy of nations that would be coming together in the last days to attack Israel. And now, just as the world was sleeping, not paying attention to Bible prophecy, we saw on the news on the 29th of March 2015 that as you see in this headline, Arab League agrees to create joint military force. Leaders of the league's 22 countries agree in principle to form force to counter extremism and police instability. Now, right now, they're talking about Yemen, and many of these nations have already started to partake with Saudi Arabia in bombing Yemen, for example, the Egyptians. And of course, the Egyptians are mentioned in the Psalm 83 war. It says the Arab League on Sunday called for the creation of a joint military force to counter extremism and political instability across the Middle East amid the Saudi Arabia-led operation carrying out airstrikes in Yemen. At a meeting in the Sharm el-Sheikh chaired by the Egyptian President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, leaders of the 22 countries of the Arab League agreed in principle to form a joint force that would take military action against threats to the peace and security of another member state, according to the final declaration closing the two-day summit. Participation in such a force would be optional, the declaration said, and such a plan is unlikely to factor into the continuing operation in Yemen. All right, so let me break it down a little bit more for you, because what we see here in peace and security. Well, what we know for sure is there's going to be a confederacy. We saw that in Psalm 83. So in the near future, as this confederacy of nations come together, and you'll see there's 22 there now, but it doesn't say that all 22 of those nations would have to invade Israel in the Psalm 83 war. It could just be the ones that are actually named in the Psalm 83 war who take part of that attack. Now, it's very interesting that in this article, they're talking about peace and security. And what did Jesus say about the peace and security? When we hear these very same words, what would happen? Well, let's take a look for those of you who may not know. When you look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 3 and 4, you will see the identical words. Take a look at this. It says, "For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief." So now you know why I'm pointing out the peace and security that was mentioned in this article about the Arabs coming together, forming this coalition. The article goes on to say, starting here, "The plan, which is still in its infancy, will take months to formulate. In the first concrete step towards a united military force that Mr. Sisi had sought in early February after a Libyan affiliate of Islamic State beheaded 22 Egyptian immigrant workers there, drawing airstrikes from the Egyptian Air Force against militant sites in the Libyan city of Darna." So this paragraph becomes very, very important to us, because what's not to say that in the very near future, as we've already seen that the peace and safety talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis have been broken off. Who knows? Maybe during the blood moon that's coming up in April. We've seen a lot of prophecies happen during these blood moons and these solar eclipses. So just for example, what if the Palestinians start again and Israel goes in, as they have in the past? Well, is it possible that this newly formed coalition of Arab nations would come together and attack Israel to fulfill the Psalm 83 war? Very, very possible. And that's what we need to be on the watch for. We need to be watching what's going on in the Middle East, because we know that the prophecies that haven't been fulfilled yet are going to be fulfilled soon. And we know this by all the events that are being played out in the Middle East. They're all the same nations, and they're forming these alliances as we see in Scripture. So very, very important information. Now, as far as Iran is concerned, all of you who have come to my YouTube channel or my website know, and those of you who have read my book understand, that I've pointed out the Ezekiel 38 war, of which Iran is one of the major players attacking Israel in the last times with Russia and many of the Muslim allies. And I've been warning ever since Barack Obama was the president, nothing would be done to stop the Iranians from getting a hold of a nuclear bomb that no doubt that they would use against the Israelis. They've mentioned many times that they wanted to annihilate the Jewish people. And for the past 6 years almost, I've been warning you, as I said, nothing would happen. The United States wouldn't stop them. Well, we're getting down to the end of the wire now, and all these years, nothing has stopped the Iranians from trying to get a hold of that bomb. And so March the 29th of 2015, we see the headline, Iran deal worse than Israel feared. Netanyahu says, this is important because the Prime Minister of Israel has said on many occasions that they would stop the Iranians. If no one else was able to stop them, they would be forced to go in, bomb, and take out those nuclear facilities who are trying to make an atomic bomb. Now, in this March 29th article, it says Iran deal obviously is the worst. So let's take a look. It says the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Sunday against the emerging nuclear deal with Iran as Iranian and Western officials in Lausanne, Switzerland were rushing to reach a framework agreement by the end of the month deadline. After the Beirut-Damascus-Baghdad axis, and of course Beirut, Damascus, all mentioned, if you will, in the Psalm 83, those same people. Iran is maneuvering from the south to take over the entire Middle East. Netanyahu said at a cabinet meeting, one of the last for his outgoing government. The Iran-Lausanne-Yemen axis is dangerous for mankind and must be stopped. Netanyahu told ministers that he had spoken with Republican leaders in the U.S. Senate and conveyed our serious concern regarding the arrangement with Iran at the nuclear talks. This agreement confirms all our fears and exceeds them. While world powers conveyed to sign this deal, Iran's proxies in Yemen are conquering large swaths of land in an effort to overtake the Bab el-Mandeb Straits so that they can change the balance of power in shipping oil, he said, referring to the recent unrest in Yemen. So again, we can see in this article that the Prime Minister of Israel is really behind the scenes, without saying, is threatening that they're going to have to stop them. They must be stopped. He's mentioned it. He's talked about it at the UN. He said this same scenario many, many times in the news reports. So as the deadline looms now, and of course the deadline is for tomorrow, and so we're going into April the 1st, and 4 days later we have a blood moon. So this is why I'm saying let's just pay attention to see what happens here, because who knows, maybe there will be a conflict that will break out with the blood moon. Many times Israel's been faced with prophecies being fulfilled on those blood moon events. I'm going to play a little clip for you. It gives you a little bit more information about the Iranian nuclear talks.
Good morning from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Jane King for The Street, and today is Monday, March 30th. Well, Iran is reportedly backing away from a key detail in the nuclear deal. The deadline is less than 2 days away, and the New York Times reports that Iran is no longer willing to ship their atomic fuel out of the country. Now, for months, Iran has tentatively agreed that it would send a large portion of its stockpile of uranium to Russia. But Sunday, the country's deputy foreign minister ruled out an agreement that would do that. Now, in light of all this, oil prices are trading lower this morning on expectations that Iran will reach a deal and that it will increase the supplies of oil.
One thing that's very clear, if you watched any news in the last month or month and a half, that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Barack Hussein Obama are going head to head. They do not like each other. And as the President of the United States has been in office now for almost 6 years, he has deteriorated the relationship between Israel and the United States. And in fact, what he has done is actually help fulfill Zechariah chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, where we see that at the end of the day, all of the nations will be coming against Israel. And over the past 6 years, as I already stated, I said that Barack Obama wasn't going to do anything. And now, when we look at the article that came out Sunday on March the 29th, Iranian defector, U.S. working on behalf of Iran. And one immediately would say, what the heck are they talking about here? I thought that President Barack Hussein Obama was trying to stop Iran. So what are they doing working on their behalf? Well, it says this: an Iranian journalist and top media aide to Iran's President Hassan Rouhani defected while covering the nuclear talks in Switzerland and has accused the United States team of acting on Iran's behalf in negotiations. Now, if we're allied with Israel, what the heck is the president standing on the side of the Iranians for? It doesn't make any sense. Well, unless the president is Muslim and he's leaning in the Muslim arena. Amir Hassan Magani defected last week, saying he no longer saw any point in his profession in a country whose government told him what to write, the UK's Telegraph reported. Now, Magani told the London-based Irani Farda on Iranian opposition television station that the American team is working to convince the other members of the UN Security Council nations and Germany, the P5+1 powers. The U.S. negotiating team are mainly there to speak on Iran's behalf with other members of the P5+1 countries and convince them of a deal, he said. Now, this causes a major problem with the nation of Israel, who said that they would take Iran out. So as I said earlier, let's watch the news, because we may see the conflict between Israel and Iran to go in there and stop their nuclear facilities, stop the Iranians from getting a hold of a bomb. Don't expect that the President of the United States is going to do any favors for Israel. It just won't happen. Now, while this is all going on, we have to take a look at some of these other prophecies, because the Lord did tell us in Matthew chapter 24, for example, that when we shall see all these things, know that it's near, even at the door. So when all of the signs are taking place all at the same time, that would be the indication that the Lord would be returning soon. But in Luke 21:11, one of those signs had to do with earthquakes, and also in Mark 13:8. Look what it said. And there will be great earthquakes in various places, and famines and pestilence, and there will be fearful sights and great signs from heaven. In Mark 13:8 it says, and for nation shall rise against nation. And of course, we're talking about that today between Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and how Egypt's getting involved and sending airplanes over. And kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be earthquakes in divers places. So let's take a look at the earthquakes that were just reported. You'll see March the 30th, strong earthquakes strike South Pacific. A pair of strong earthquakes struck off the South Pacific nations of Tonga and Samoa on Monday, but there were no immediate reports of injuries or damage, and no tsunami warning was issued. And so a 6.4 earthquake, as we see here in this article, it's discussing the magnitude. That's a pretty big earthquake for that area. But there was an even bigger one. Now this is a really huge one, a major 7.7. Earthquake strikes off Papua New Guinea, tsunami warning issued. This came from Rutgers. A major earthquake with a magnitude 7.7 struck off Papua New Guinea on Monday, official monitors said. And a tsunami warning was issued soon after. The epicenter at 33 kilometers, 22 miles deep. The quake was near the town of Rebiul in the northeast of Papua New Guinea. So there you have two pretty good size earthquakes. A 7.7, that's huge. And then you have the other one at 6.4. But you're going to see more. And again, let's not forget about the blood moon that is coming up. And as I said earlier in this video, that we've seen lots of prophecies taking place during these signs in the sky, which happen to be the blood moons and these eclipses that we've been seeing in 2014 and again in 2015.